The headline, splashed across the tablet screen, made Sarah's stomach lurch. GOLD digging NURSE or CEESTRATE Billionaire. CEO is ACIDient. Below it was a paparazzi photo of her and Alex leaving their favorite coffee shop, his hand protectively at the small of her back. "Don't read that trash," Alex said, trying to take the tablet away, but Sarah's eyes were already scanning the article. Sources close to Morrison Technologies suggest the convenient timing of the accident. She felt sick. "They're saying I staged the whole thing. That I researched your route and deliberately waited for you that morning." The sound of camera shutters clicked outside her apartment window. The paparazzi had found her home address. Alex's security team had warned them this might happen, but the reality was still jarring. "Sarah." Alex knelt before her, taking her trembling hands in his. "Look at me, not them." His gray eyes held the same steadiness they'd had during their rooftop conversations. "We know the truth." But the truth seemed to matter little in the court of public opinion. Social media exploded with speculation. Old photos from her college Facebook account surfaced, including one of her at a costume party, used out of context to paint her as a party girl. Someone leaked her salary information, creating elaborate theories about her supposed financial motivations. The final straw came when a reporter ambushed her parents at their small restaurant. "How does it feel to know your daughter seduced one of America's wealthiest men?" The video of her father's confused, hurt expression went viral. That night, Sarah found herself back on the hospital roof, her sanctuary now feeling exposed as she spotted camera flashes from neighboring buildings. "Maybe they're right," she whispered as Alex joined her. "Not about staging the accident, but about us. We're from different worlds." "No," Alex's voice was firm. "We're from the same world, the one where people choose to help others, where connections matter more than credentials." He pulled out his phone, showing her something that made her breath catch. It was a social media thread, thousands of comments long. Former patients sharing stories of her kindness. A teenage boy she'd sung to during his chemotherapy. A homeless man who remembered how she'd bought him socks and a warm meal. Colleagues recounting nights she'd stayed past her shift to hold the hands of dying patients who had no family. "Your world," Alex said softly, "is one I'm honored to be part of." The next morning, Alex called a press conference. Sarah watched from the sidelines as he faced the media, his stance protective yet proud. "I'm here to address the rumors about my relationship with Sarah Chen," he began, his voice carrying the authority of his position, but the warmth she'd first known in his hospital room. "The only thing orchestrated that morning was fate giving me the chance to meet the most genuine person I've ever known." As he continued, defending her character while respecting her privacy, Sarah realized something profound. Love wasn't just about surviving life's crashes. It was about choosing to stand together in the aftermath, even when the whole world was watching. The hospital's rooftop garden had become their sanctuary. During Alex's week-long recovery, Sarah found herself drawn there during her breaks, and somehow he always seemed to know when to find her. Tonight, the city lights sparkled below them like earthbound stars, and the early summer air carried the faint scent of blooming jasmine from the garden's planters. "Your parents sound remarkable," Alex said, his hands wrapped around a cup of hospital coffee that Sarah knew was barely drinkable. He'd insisted on getting it for both of them anyway, despite her protests. Moving to a new country with nothing but hope and determination. Sarah smiled, remembering her father's calloused hands and her mother's endless hours at the sewing machine. They worked at 3 jobs each, lived in a tiny apartment in Chinatown. "Dad would practice English by reading medical textbooks to me at night. He was a doctor in Taiwan, but couldn't practice here. That's what inspired me to go into healthcare. And now you're saving lives." Alex observed quietly, his gray eyes reflecting the city lights, including mine. There was something in his voice that made Sarah look at him more closely. Despite his claimed amnesia about his past, Alex spoke with the subtle confidence of someone accustomed to being heard. His insights about hospital administration and healthcare technology were surprisingly sophisticated for someone who claimed to work in tech management. "Your turn," she said, turning on the bench to face him better. Any memories surfacing about your family? A complex emotion flickered across his face. Some fragments. A large house that felt empty. A father who was always in meetings. A mother who threw charity galas, but rarely had time for dinner. He paused, then added softly, I remember wanting something different for myself. Sarah felt an unexpected ache in her chest at the loneliness in his words. And now, in your tech management job. Alex's laugh held a hint of irony. Now I'm the one always in meetings. His fingers absently traced the rim of his coffee cup. But talking with you, it reminds me of what I wanted to build. Real connections. Purpose beyond profit margins. A comfortable silence fell between them, filled with the distant sounds of the city and the gentle rustling of leaves in the rooftop garden. Sarah found herself studying his profile, the strong line of his jaw, the way his shoulders carried tension he seemed unaware of. Sometimes, she said finally, we need to get lost to find our way back to ourselves. Alex turned to her, surprise and something deeper in his expression. For a moment, Sarah thought he might say more, might finally reveal what he was holding back. Instead, he reached out and gently squeezed her hand, the gesture carrying more meaning than words could convey. Neither of them mentioned how their hands remained linked as they watched the city lights flicker below, each lost in thoughts of paths taken and choices yet to make. The rooftop garden felt different in evening wear. Sarah's heels sank slightly into the soft soil as she paced between the planters, the jasmine's sweet scent now seeming cloying and false. Her borrowed dress caught the cool night breeze, and she wrapped her arms around herself, though the chill she felt had nothing to do with the temperature. The door creaked open behind her. She didn't need to turn to know it was him, Alexander Morrison, Billionaire's CEO, the man who'd let her believe he was just another patient named Alex. Sarah. His voice carried the same warmth it always had, and that somehow made it worse. Was any of it real? She asked, still facing the city lights. Or was I just an amusing distraction during your hospital stay, Mr. Morrison? She heard his sharp intake of breath at the formal address. His footsteps approached, stopping a respectful distance away. Everything I shared with you was real. My name and position were the only things I held back. Sarah whirled to face him, anger and hurt burning in her chest. Only things? Your entire life, Alex, or whatever I should call you, is built around who you are. Every conversation we had was shaped by what you chose to hide. That's exactly why I didn't tell you. The polished CEO facade cracked, revealing raw emotion beneath. Do you know how many people in my life want something from me? How many relationships I've had where I was nothing but a means to an end? He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, disheveling it into something closer to the Alex she'd known. When I woke up in that hospital bed and saw how you treated me, just another patient, just another human being, I couldn't bear to lose that authenticity. So you lied to keep things authentic. Sarah's laugh held no humor. Do you realize how absurd that sounds? I realize how afraid I was, he admitted quietly. Afraid that if you knew who I was, our conversations would change. That instead of sharing stories about your parents, you'd start calculating the value of my company. That instead of calling me out when I was being stubborn about physical therapy, you'd defer to the billionaire's wishes. Sarah felt her anger falter as vulnerability crept into his voice. You didn't trust me enough to make that choice for myself. No, he agreed, taking a tentative step closer. I trusted you completely. It was the weight of my world I didn't trust. The way it changes people corrupts genuine connections. His gray eyes held hers, pleading for understanding. I wanted, needed, to know if something real was possible before that world crashed in. The city hummed below them, 1,000 lives continuing while theirs hung suspended in this moment. Sarah felt tears threatening and blinked them back. And now, was anything real enough to survive the truth? Trust, Sarah discovered, could be rebuilt in the smallest of moments. It began one rainy morning 3 weeks after the gala, when she emerged from an exhausting night shift to find Alex standing outside the hospital's staff entrance, sheltering 2 cups from the downpour. Lavender latte, extra hot, 1 pump of vanilla, he said, offering her the cup. From that little place on Maple Street, you mentioned during our third conversation on the roof. She hesitated before accepting it, noting how he made no move to press her for more. He simply nodded and turned to leave, respecting the boundaries she'd set. Same time tomorrow, he called over his shoulder, not asking but promising. And he was there, every morning for 2 weeks, with her perfect coffee order. Some days she took the cup in silence. Other days, she found herself sharing snippets about difficult patients or challenging cases. He listened with the same genuine interest he'd shown in the hospital, but now he offered insights from his own world, the real one. I'm implementing a mental health program for our employees, he told her one morning, his suit jacket slightly rumpled from an all-night strategy session. Your stories about burnout in healthcare made me realize we weren't doing enough. It was the way he integrated their past conversations into his present actions that began to heal the breach. When she mentioned her parents' upcoming 40th anniversary, he didn't grand gesture with expensive gifts. Instead, he asked thoughtful questions about their favorite traditions and offered to help find a Taiwanese chef who could recreate their wedding menu. The breaking point came during a particularly brutal shift. Sarah lost a young patient, a girl the same age as her niece, and the weight of it threatened to crush her. She found herself walking to their old spot on the roof, not even surprised to find him already there. I heard about what happened, he said simply, opening his arms. This time, she let herself fall into them, her tears soaking his $1,000 shirt while he held her in silence. How did you know? She asked later, when the storm of grief had passed. I pay attention, he replied softly, to the things that matter. He paused, then added, I have a meeting with the board in an hour about implementing a hospital-wide grief counseling program for staff. Would you be willing to consult on it? Sarah studied him in the early morning light. He was different now, not the mysterious patient or the polished CEO, but something more real, a man learning to bridge both worlds, to be vulnerable without losing strength. You're really trying, aren't you? She said, realizing the truth of it as she spoke. Alex reached for her hand, his touch tentative but honest. I lost the right to ask for your trust, he admitted, but I'll spend as long as it takes to earn it back, 1 cup of coffee at a time. In that moment, Sarah recognized that perhaps trust wasn't just about grand revelations, but about the choice to be present, consistently and authentically, in all the small moments that made up a life. Sarah Chen's fingers drummed absently against her steering wheel as she navigated the winding road home, her mind still processing the chaos of her last hour in the ER. A teenager with a skateboarding accident, an elderly man with chest pains, and a cooking mishap that had left a young mother with second-degree burns. Just another night shift at Metro General, where every moment could mean the difference between life and death. The digital display on her dashboard read 6:47 am. Dawn was breaking over the city, painting the rain-slick streets in hues of purple and gold. Sarah blinked hard, fighting the fatigue that came with a 12-hour shift. Just 15 more minutes, and she could sink into her memory foam mattress, pull up her weighted blanket, and let the world fade away. That's when she saw it, a gleam of metal where it shouldn't be, partially obscured by the morning mist. A Tesla Model S lay on its roof in the drainage ditch, its sleek silver body now crumpled like discarded aluminum foil. Thin wisps of smoke curled from the undercarriage, dancing ominously in the early morning light. Sarah's training kicked in before conscious thought could catch up. Her Honda Civic's tires squealed as she pulled onto the shoulder, hazard lights already blinking. She grabbed her emergency medical kit from the trunk, a habit her colleagues had once teased her about, until that kit had saved a choking child at a restaurant 3 months ago. Hello, can you hear me? She called out, approaching the wreck. The acrid smell of burnt rubber and something else, something electrical, filled her nostrils. The driver's side window was shattered, offering a glimpse of an unconscious man still strapped into his seat, hanging upside down. Blood trickled upward from his hairline, defying gravity. Time seemed to slow as Sarah assessed the situation. The smoke was getting thicker, and her nose caught the distinctive odor of lithium batteries beginning to burn. She knew the statistics. Electric vehicle fires could be devastatingly intense once they took hold. Sir, I'm a nurse. I'm going to get you out. Her voice remained steady, professional, even as her heart raced. The man's only response was a faint groan. The seatbelt release jammed twice before giving way. Sarah braced herself, supporting the man's weight as he slumped toward her. He was heavy, easily 6 feet tall, dressed in what felt like expensive fabric under her grip. None of that mattered. What mattered was the weak but present pulse she felt at his neck, the shallow but steady breaths she could hear. With strength born of adrenaline and years of moving unconscious patience, Sarah dragged him clear of the wreck. Not a moment too soon. The smoke had turned black, and she could see orange flames beginning to lick at the underside of the vehicle. As she began her initial assessment, her phone already dialing 911 on speaker, Sarah noticed the man's face seemed almost peaceful despite the circumstances. She had no way of knowing that this moment, this simple act of doing her duty, would change both their lives forever. The Metro General Hospital's annual fundraising gala transformed the usually sterile Grand Conference Hall into an elegant venue awash in soft lighting and flowing champagne. Sarah felt almost out of place in her borrowed dress. A midnight blue number her friend Lisa had insisted brought out her eyes. She'd rather be in her scrubs, doing her rounds, but attendance was expected of key hospital staff. "You're fidgeting again," Lisa whispered, passing her a flute of champagne. "Relax. You've earned your place here as much as any of these donors." Sarah smiled weakly, scanning the crowd of designer suits and evening gowns. 2 months had passed since Alex's discharge, and though they'd exchanged a few texts, their rooftop conversations felt like a distant dream. She'd thrown herself back into her work, trying to ignore the hollow feeling his absence had left. The hospital administrator approached the podium, tapping the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our keynote speaker, the CEO of Morrison Technologies, Mr. Alexander Morrison." Sarah's champagne flute nearly slipped from her fingers. There, striding confidently toward the podium, was Alex. Gone was the hospital gown, replaced by an impeccably tailored tuxedo. His hair was perfectly styled, his posture commanding, but she would know those stone gray eyes anywhere. "Good evening." His familiar voice filled the room, carrying the same warmth that had once been reserved for their private conversations. 2 months ago, I experienced firsthand the exceptional care provided by this institution when I was brought here after a car accident. The room blurred around Sarah as pieces clicked into place. The expensive watch, his knowledge of healthcare systems, the way he'd carefully redirected personal questions. She felt Lisa's hand grip her arm in shock as Alex continued. "Today, I'm announcing Morrison Technologies' commitment of $50 million to establish a state-of-the-art trauma center. This investment isn't just about technology, it's about the dedicated professionals who make this hospital what it is." His eyes swept the room, and for a brief moment, they locked with Sarah's. She saw recognition flash across his face, followed by something that looked like fear. The confident CEO facade cracked ever so slightly. "One such professional saved my life that morning, rushing toward danger rather than away from it. She reminded me that true value lies not in what we own, but in what we give back to others." Sarah couldn't breathe. The corners of her vision darkened as memories flooded back. The conversations about his tech management job, his supposed amnesia, every carefully constructed half-truth. Without a word to Lisa, she turned and fled the hall, her heels clicking against the marble floors as she sought escape. Behind her, she could hear Alex's voice falter slightly in his speech, and she knew he'd seen her go. The same words kept echoing in her mind. It had all been a lie. 1 year to the day after the accident, Sarah found herself again on the rooftop garden of Metro General. The space had transformed. The once sparse planters now overflowed with jasmine and lavender, and soft lighting tucked between the foliage created an ethereal glow in the deepening twilight. She recognized Alex's touch in every detail, yet something felt different tonight. "Remember our first real conversation up here?" Alex's voice came from behind her. He'd shed his usual corporate armor, no tie, jacket casual, sleeve rolled up in the way she'd first seen him during his recovery. "You were supposed to be resting in your room," Sarah smiled, turning to face him. "Instead, you followed me up here during my break. Best act of disobedience in my life." He moved closer, taking her hands in his. The familiar calluses on his fingers, earned now from actual work, not just physical therapy, brushed against her skin. You told me that night that sometimes we need to get lost to find our way back to ourselves. Sarah's breath caught as Alex dropped to one knee. The ring he held wasn't what anyone would expect from a billionaire CEO, a vintage piece with a modest diamond surrounded by delicate sapphires, clearly chosen for meaning rather than show. This was my grandmother's, he explained, his voice thick with emotion. She was a nurse during World War II. Met my grandfather when he was her patient. His laugh was soft, warm. Must run in the family, falling for the women who heal us. Tears blurred Sarah's vision as he continued. The accident that brought me here wasn't just about surviving a crash. It was about crashing through the walls I'd built around myself. You didn't just save my life that morning. You showed me how to live it. Before he could formally ask, Sarah pulled him to his feet, wrapping her arms around him. Yes, she whispered against his chest, feeling his heart racing to match her own. Later, during their intimate rooftop celebration with family and close friends, Alex clinked his glass for attention. Sarah's parents beamed from their seats of honor, her mother dabbing at happy tears. Today isn't just about our engagement, Alex announced, his arm secure around Sarah's waist. It's about creating something lasting from our story. I'm proud to announce the Chen Morrison Foundation for Emergency Medical Workers. He turned to Sarah's parents as he continued. The foundation will provide scholarships to immigrant families pursuing medical careers and support programs for healthcare worker wellness. His voice softened, because sometimes the real heroes are the ones who show up day after day, doing the hard work of caring for others. As applause filled the rooftop garden, Sarah looked up at the man she'd pulled from a wreck 1 year ago. In his eyes, she still saw the quiet patient who'd shared her breaks, the vulnerable man who'd feared losing authenticity, and now the partner who'd learned to merge all parts of himself into someone even stronger. Their story, she realized, wasn't just about a rescue or a revelation. It was about the courage to be seen, the strength to be genuine, and the faith to believe that love, when it's real, can survive any crash. The steady beeping of medical monitors filled room 412 of Metro General's ICU. Sarah paused in the doorway, her scrubs fresh and crisp at the start of another night shift. The man she'd pulled from the wreckage lay still, tubes and wires creating a complex web around his muscular frame. 3 days had passed, and yet no one had claimed him. The police had found no wallet in the destroyed Tesla, and the vehicle's registration was linked to a corporate fleet. Even more peculiar, no missing person reports matched his description. A well-built man in his late 30s, with salt and pepper hair at his temples and hands that, despite their current stillness, showed signs of constant activity. "How's our John Doe doing, Marie?" Sarah asked the day shift nurse, who was updating the patient's chart. "Blood pressures stabilized, and the brain swelling's down," Marie replied, giving Sarah a knowing smile. "This is the 3rd time you've checked on him outside your rounds." Sarah felt heat rise to her cheeks. "He's my rescue. I just want to make sure he pulls through." The truth was more complicated. Something about this man intrigued her. Maybe it was the elegant watch they'd removed from his wrist, a subtle yet expensive timepiece that spoke of refined taste rather than flashy wealth. Or perhaps it was the way his features, even in unconsciousness, held a hint of both strength and gentleness. As she checked his vitals, his eyelids fluttered. Sarah held her breath. Slowly, deliberately, his eyes opened, revealing irises the color of storm clouds. His gaze, though groggy, held surprising clarity. "Welcome back," Sarah said softly, pressing the call button for the doctor. "You're in Metro General Hospital. I'm Sarah, your nurse." He swallowed hard, wincing slightly. Sarah helped him take a small sip of water. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice hoarse, but carrying a distinctive warmth. "I'm Alex. Do you remember what happened, Alex?" He frowned, one hand moving to the bandage on his forehead. "The crash. Someone pulled me out." His eyes widened slightly as they focused on her face. "It was you, wasn't it?" Sarah nodded, noting how his gaze held hers with unexpected intensity. "Can you tell us your last name? We haven't been able to contact any family." A shadow passed over his face, so quickly she almost missed it. I'm afraid things are still a bit fuzzy. The crash, he paused, appearing genuinely confused. The details aren't clear. As the doctor arrived to begin his assessment, Sarah watched Alex's responses. His apparent amnesia seemed genuine, yet something in her gut told her there was more to his story. What she couldn't know was that Alexander Morrison, CEO of Morrison Technologies, was making a conscious choice in that moment. A choice that would lead them both down an unexpected path.